Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a notice of review regarding an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house on land at Fallhills, Howgate. Elected members carried out a site visit this morning, and by way of explanation, after today's discussion, decision notice does get issued through the Chair, setting out the local review body's decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Just open up to members for their contributions or stroke questions, whatever. Okay. Oh, Councillor.
Yes, I think we're in the territory of the 5+1 rules for building in the countryside. We did look at these some time ago in respect of a new house at Crichton, which you'll remember, which was in a very sensitive spot because it was outstanding landscape value and it was conservation area. And there it was on the edge of an existing development, and equestrian uses had been involved in the past. So to that extent, this is a comparable situation. And I think the Crichton one was much more difficult than this. I see you've led the arguments that are set out in the 2009 document regarding this, but missed out, I think, what could be grounds for us to do something creative here with the developer. You say, where such a feature, in other words, a containment feature does not exist, there should be potential for such a feature to be provided so long as it is in character with the scale and appearance of the group. The containment of this site is actually the B6372, so I don't think ribbon development is a risk here. What I do get, though, is the visibility of this property from the road. And I would have thought it's possible to insist on tree planting such that we can create the, as it were, the bookend for this development, which will, judging by this map, mean there won't be another house requested here. Do you remember at Crichton, the bookend was a rather mothy tree, which I drove past this morning. It's now at about 20 degrees slant, and we observed at the time there's not much life to it. So it's kind of ironic that an old tree can be a buffer, but the planting of new trees perhaps can't. It's quite a big site, this. I think that's going to mean quite a lot of expense for the developer. In terms of its overall relation, as we saw, the farm buildings here are quite spaced out. So the distance from the existing developments, I think in this specific case, doesn't strike me as being a visual anomaly. So for all these reasons, and with great emphasis on having the high standard of local and compatible materials, which we've seen in previous developments here, I would think we can interpret our rules and enforce them in the manner of creating the tree coverage to enhance the site and to screen it from the B6372, which acts as the natural barrier.
Thanks, Councillor Smell, for that. just one question, Peter, and clearly this is now the first one in particular that's come up in terms of a new build, individual new build, and indeed dealing with policies contained within PF4. Could I maybe just have an explanation, because I genuinely don't understand this. And I looked through the agent's response to all that they would be putting into the new build house, and I thought to myself, wow, this is fantastic. But the words on the paragraph after that says, there are no extra measures which help address the climate and nature crisis. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what else is there that the planning officer sees that isn't there within that response? And I have to say, I was a bit bowled over by the whole thing, because I didn't realise the amount of policies that are in here is phenomenal. And actually the answer to what the house would be and what would be in it and what would be outside it, with bird box for habitat, bee bricks, the bat boxes, swift boxes, etc. And then it comes right at the bottom end of the next paragraph saying there are no extra measures which help address the climate and nature change. And I think from an individual point of view, I'm sure for other members as well, it'd be really quite good to perhaps maybe have, I don't know, an explanation of what has to happen, or what are planners taking out of MPF4 that perhaps elected members haven't quite got up to speed with about that. You know, it's a genuine question. I really don't understand. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think there's two sides to this, or there's two components to this, which apply in this case, but will also apply to similar sort of situations. So these are general points. In terms of looking at sustainability, climate change, biodiversity, the first point is that you can look at the individual site, the individual plot, the individual build. You can look at the energy efficiency in terms of the building. You can look at whether they're using renewable energy. You can look at biodiversity-friendly planting. So there's a lot you can do on a site to make it more sustainable and make a positive contribution to biodiversity. The second point, though, is the difficult one, which is, at the end of the day, it's still in a rural location, away from public transport. It's going to be very much a car-based development, which requires car journeys to work, school, leisure, shopping, the rest of it. So it's fundamentally not in a sustainable location because you don't have that access to active travel or, like I say, the public transport services that you would expect in more sustainable locations, which obviously towns, built-up areas. So those are the two components of it. I think what you've got here in the report is that situation where it's still fundamentally in the wrong place because it's not in that sustainable location. So, like yourself, Chair, you can acknowledge straight away that the applicant is endeavouring to make the bit that they can control, shall we say, as sustainable as possible, but the bit which maybe they can't control, which is access to services, public transport, etc. There's very little they can do about that.
Okay, thanks for that. Cassidy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was a bit confused by that aspect as well. You've shone a bit of light on it for me there, Peter. Thank you. The one thing that the dichotomy here to me is that when I first started on this committee, planners would look at town centres and say people couldn't build on town centres because there was no parking. It's a kind of reverse scenario we have here, where we're saying we can't build there because there's no bus service in the country. I think anyone building there or buying that house will understand that there is no bus service, there is no, they're going to have to use a car, and I know that's a carbon footprint. But the offset here for me is as you say, the bird boxes, the bee bricks, the stuff that, and people do have to live somewhere, and I think that we need to use pieces like this. So that bit of ground, to me, at the moment, doesn't contribute anything to the environment. It's just a piece of hard standing for horses to trot around. So, just my little bit of input.
Thanks, Councillor Cassidy. I'll bring Councillor McEwen in, and then I'll bring you back again, Councillor Smale.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, on the road access point, we have quite recently agreed to have 3 or 4 executive-style houses at Mount Lothian where exactly that criteria would apply, no buses. And Crichton was absolutely no buses, but this didn't seem to be a killer argument in those occasions. So I just wonder if we're in danger of creating a more restrictive policy on the foot. Clearly, just a single house is not going to make much difference. The B67372, as we saw today, is not a busy road. The rural area of Midlothian depopulated very strongly between the First and Second World Wars, and it's only now getting back to being a desirable place to live, what with the internet and so on. And what you have here is really, I think, a sort of Scottish firm tune arrangement, as was the case in the 18th and early 19th century, before you had planned villages like Ormiston. And the addition of an extra house makes that little cluster more viable, more neighbours to help when people need to get to appointments when they can't use their car. So I would have thought this is, on this specific occasion, with all the add-ons in terms of screening and high quality that we talked about, I would have thought this is a positive development, and that the absence of transport, as my colleague Colin points out, is something that a buyer will expect, and does not have a major impact on our policies.
Thanks, Councillor Smale. Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I concur with Councillor Smale, especially when it was drawn to my attention that the equestrian activity is no longer required on that footprint. So it's neither going to be used for agricultural, it's a site just lying, hard-standing site just lying there. And I'm duly bound to award planning here, because it's going to certainly enhance the site and enhance the access to the site, and it's going to enhance the overall look of the site, I think, because where I was this morning, it didn't particularly look very pleasing as a countryside aspect, in view of the fact it's not being used for any equestrian at all. It's just going to lie and remain as a hard stand site. So I'm of a view to grant planning, Chair. Thank you.
I'm not hearing a lot of people. Oh, Councillor Smale.
Yeah, just a point of information. And Fallhills was actually identified in 2009 as one of the sites that was legitimate for additional development. I just wondered if they've already had their 1 out of 5 with the house that we viewed on our way in, and so we're really in a territory that you haven't really explored is what happens when we get to 2 out of 5. I know the places like Borthwick, where they've been were scheduled to have 1, but has actually had 3 developments since 2009. But Peter, I just wonder if you could comment on that aspect.
I'll bring in Peter just now, but it is an area that we know well because we've been up there on a number of occasions. But I'll bring Peter in just to update the LRB on what we have done to date.
Yeah, Chair. I'll just start with the principle yeah, there's been a policy, I think, since the 2008 local plan. It was then reinforced in the 2017 local plan, which had supported, one of the ways that we tried to support some rural economies and rural housing was this sort of cluster policy. For every 5 units, you could get an additional unit during the life of the plan. And Councillor Smith, I think the document you had in your hand just now was the guidance, the additional supplementary guidance that came round, which identified a whole collection of sites across the district where you could add these extra dwelling houses. And in terms of this site, when you're out on the site this morning, literally behind you was a relatively modern build. That was the last one that was built to the Fallhills cluster. Earlier on the other side of the group, there was another one built. So that was on the back of that policy, and that policy has a number of criteria in it about trying to get those buildings look together as a group, infill gaps, etc. There's a range of issues there. It's far from perfect, because it's often, you know, you'll get a proposal come forward and you think, well, is that the best one? You know, you don't know whether other sites will come forward, so you recognise that when you're drafting the policy, but it was there just to try and help rural communities. In this situation, because you get that additional unit per 5 for every local plan, in effect. The previous ones, you could say, well, they were under the previous local plan, but since 2017, there hasn't been one at Fallhills, so you get that opportunity to add to the cluster. So you could, if Grant and Planning Commission here today, say, well, actually, this one is that +1 from the 2017 plan.
I see, so the 5+1 formula is a rolling thing, and after the plan has had 5 years or so, then the 6th house doesn't count anymore, and it's 6+1. Yep, okay, thank you for that clarification.
Peter.
Yeah, just to make a side point, really, might be of interest. Obviously, members are aware we're working on our replacement local plan. So these are the sort of things that we can have conversations and decide what elected members want to do going forward in terms of how you address the issue of, I would say, housing in the countryside. You know, there is a need, I would say, to support rural economies, provide housing, especially affordable housing in countryside locations. So it's a question of how best to do that. So that's a point of general conversation to come.
Just before I bring you in, Councillor Cassidy, and I will bring you in, it's just to explain that we agonised the 5 in number. We were to and fro about, is that the right number? Is it too high? Is it too low? We also agonised about the +1, because I said if there was a situation where 2 people came along because they saw there was an opportunity, how do you choose between who should get and who shouldn't get? And probably the reality was that both would have got, but I mean, that was never, fortunately, that was never put to the test, but it did get close to it. So it's a difficult one. I think it's a good one for members actually to have a good think about. And I do think it's something we could capture in the next local plan, because it is something that, as you rightly say, Councillor Smale, a lot of people do want to go into the countryside and develop something meaningful within the countryside and be part of that countryside. It's how we balance that against all the other policies that are in there within MPF4 in particular. So it's a good point. It's worth a good debate on that. So thanks for raising that anyway. Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to second, if Councillor McEwen's proposing this, I'll second his proposal to grant.
Right, thanks. Back to the business, you mean? Thank you.
Yeah, very importantly, subject to the screening aspect, as well as all the usual conditions about compatible materials for the countryside that are in our policies.
That will obviously be picked up when it comes to the detailed planning application, so it's something that can be taken back to the applicant to make sure that that's incorporated when they come in with the detail. So, is there anybody otherwise minded? Are you quite happy with the conditions that have been set out on the agenda, subject to that additional condition that Councillor Smale is asking for? Okay, right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your attendance, and thanks.